When you need to build up your team to handle the growing chaos at work, use Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It gives your job post the boost it needs to be seen and helps reach people with the right skills, certifications, and more. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need a hiring hero? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs.
This episode is brought to you by Accenture. When your advertising operations fall out of sync, everything else follows. Spotify and Accenture are working together to reinvent the rhythm of ad sales, using automation, analytics, and smarter workflows to simplify campaign delivery and access better data across the business. The result? Less time spent on operations, more time connecting brands with the moments and fandoms that matter most. Learn more at accenture.com/Spotify.
Welcome to the All Things Nintendo podcast. I'm Brian Shea, and this is a weekly podcast to discuss all the biggest news and games from the world of Nintendo. I hope you enjoyed episode 250 last week, where we came to the conclusion that The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time is our pick for the greatest Nintendo game of all time. This week, we're going to kind of do a sequel to that episode. We're not going to do another ranking, but instead, we are going to be discussing why The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time is such a beloved, influential, and above all else, great Nintendo game. We will be doing that after this brief introduction. I will be joined by an extraordinarily special guest. You know him as the co-founder of Kinda Funny Games. He crashed this podcast a few weeks back when his fellow co-founder at Kinda Funny was talking about Mortal Kombat 2. It's Greg Miller. He is going to be joining me for the main segment of this episode. And there's not a whole lot going on this week. You know, I've scoured for some news. There's a few things here and there. There's a new Shigeru Miyamoto interview with Famitsu, where I saw he was talking about kind of like Nintendo's philosophy towards remakes, and it does feel like it's very much in line with kind of my thought process, in that it feels like Nintendo is doing the remake thing to kind of get fans up to date, which is, you know, what I said was the case with the Ocarina of Time remake before they even announced it, and why I thought it made sense. Basically, he told Famitsu, he was like, hey, look, like, a lot of people cycle out of gaming after a set number of years, and they just hear about these games, but they're not really approachable because they're older. So this gives them a chance to experience those games, and also allows us to continue working on new titles while these games come out. So, I mean, it does kind of make sense that, a legend like Shigeru Miyamoto would have that perspective. He also talked about playing video games with his grandchildren. It was a very sweet passage in that interview. I don't have a ton to talk about before we throw to the conversation that I had with Greg about The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. There was one piece of news story that I wanted to bring up, and that was that the Pokemon Pokopia Bubbly Basin, the expansion pass DLC, it comes to Switch 2, and we already knew about that. They announced it during the Nintendo Direct around the Summer Game Fest timeframe. However, now we know the date of it. It is August 5th, 2026, and the Nintendo Store description, which Nintendo Life actually pulled, says, use the move Dive, an underwater exploration ability added in a free software update to the Pokemon Pokopia game, to visit an aquatic area of Bubbly Basin in Part 1 of the 3-part Pokemon Pokopia Expansion Pass DLC. You'll find additional furniture items, new outfits for Ditto, and, of course, more Pokemon to meet. Okay, so, that sounds cool. We're going to be getting that in just a couple weeks here, and I guess next week. Wow, I'm sorry, I had to look at the date. The summer months are just flying by, aren't they? Which, gets me even more excited for a lot of the stuff that's on the horizon for us over the course of the fall. I sometimes I will do a let's look ahead at the fall gaming calendar, which I haven't done yet this year, But I don't think that is something that I've ruled out. I think that I'm waiting for the right time, and I think that time might be coming up pretty soon here, seeing as how we are about to enter the fall gaming season. Obviously, there's heavy hitters like Fire Emblem and Ocarina of Time Remake, but there is a lot more to be excited about. September and October are jam-packed full of games. Um, and one of those games I do want to talk about before we go over to the conversation with Greg Miller. But first, I just wanted to give a reminder that this show is supported by the folks over on Patreon. There's a $3 tier that gets you access to the community Discord, a $5 tier that gets you early and ad-free episodes, and a $10 tier that gets you shout-outs at the end of every show, plus an occasional bonus episode over on the Patreon. Again, without them, this show would not be possible. I appreciate every single person who supports this show, whether it's subscribing on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Any kind of support that you can give, comments on Spotify or YouTube, positive reviews on any podcast app. 5-star reviews really do go a long way to helping this podcast continue. But obviously, the Patreon page is the best way to continue supporting this show and allow this show to continue happening week after week. It's something that I love doing, but it does take a lot of time and it does take a lot of effort to make this stuff happen. So as I continue to work on ways to make this show better and better and listen to the folks who support the show, that goes a long way, quite candidly. So the game that I wanted to talk about is a title that actually was brought to my attention. I guess it was around the June timeframe when I had former Game Informer editor and current Indie Informer head of the entire site, Jill Grote. She came on and told me about this game called Echo Weaver. And it turns out that, some of the folks who work on that game, or some of the PR folks, or somebody involved with that game, heard the conversation and reached out and said, "Hey, do you want to play the game? And would you like to, do something with Game Informer for it?" And I was, based on Jill's description, I was super enthusiastic. So I got a playable build of the game. This was a few weeks ago now. And I wrote a preview for Echo Weaver in the latest issue of Game Informer. And this game, it's the elevator pitch is it's a time loop Metroidvania inspired 2D platformer, 2D action platformer. I think it's the best way to describe it. But it's so much deeper than that, because the time loop basically that installs a hint of roguelikeness to it. But it's not a roguelike. It's just that, like, you start over at the beginning every single time. It gives me like Dead Cell vibes in that regard, but it's not the same format. Like, you're not visiting a guy every single time you start over to make it so that, like, you get upgrades and everything. Instead, you discover upgrades as you go through the adventure, but it's not locked behind, like, the upgrades aren't gated behind exploration. Instead, they're gated behind knowledge. So, like, I discovered one of the abilities before the game tutorialized it. Like, you will eventually learn, like, through a cutscene or whatever, but it's cool that, like, I was like, oh, I can, like, grapple on these hooks using this glaive that I have. The glaive is like the primary weapon. It's like kind of like a boomerang style weapon, but you can also use it in melee attacks. And you can use it to teleport. So you can throw it somewhere, and if you have like a specific place you're trying to reach, you can teleport to it. That also works for checkpointing. So, like, if you activate this portal, you can actually teleport straight to that after you are, resurrected following a death, or like the time loop ends. And the way that the time loop works is you can collect shards to kind of fill the time meter, because it's continually ticking down, and when it ends, the time resets and you're back at the start, and nobody has memory except for you. So you continue to build your knowledge, you continue to build your repertoire of abilities, and the combat feels great. The platforming feels awesome. There's time attack challenges that I found scattered throughout, where it's like you have to use like the parkour abilities that you have. So it's like you can run and slide and do special jumps and use your glaive to reach areas. And it rewards you with various resources and everything. But like if you're running low on health, you can actually sacrifice a segment of your time bar to heal yourself. And that makes it so, okay, well, now you're going to run out of time faster, but your health is higher. So it's like kind of this risk reward mechanic. I don't want to go too much into it because, again, like they call it a Metroidvania, which candidly I'm not the biggest fan of that term. I already don't really love Metroidvania, so another evolution of that term makes me like not super in love with that term. But the game itself is incredible. But it's called a Metroidvania because it's not gated behind finding the upgrades. Instead, it's gated. The upgrades are gated behind just your knowledge of it. So what that tells me is that like this game is going to be a drastically different experience on your second playthrough when you get all of these abilities right off the bat because you remember from your first playthrough. So it's almost like kind of breaking the fourth wall in that regard, which I really enjoy. I think that's a really cool concept, and I'm excited to see how it plays with that as you get deeper into the game. And it does have all the core tenets of a standard Metroid-inspired title. You know, you're exploring a 2D area with enemies scattered throughout and like bonus areas you can enter, and story drops that you're going to find as you go. But you get the map that slowly expands and shows you like, all right, you haven't been here, you haven't explored past, like there's an exit here somewhere that you can find and explore. So it really is encouraging of exploration. It's encouraging of finding kind of the next area to go. And I really had a great time with it. And it's one that skyrocketed up my list of most anticipated games for the rest of the year based on the time that I played. And I started from the very beginning of the game and I played a couple hours. So it was very, very exciting to see that this game seems to have a lot of really cool elements going for it. And they seem to have a capable understanding of what the Metroidvania genre can be and what it is already, and how they can stretch the definition of that in fun and unique ways without totally breaking what makes that genre so beloved by so many people. So I'm excited to see how it develops and how it continues to expand and where the story goes, because it is like a post-apocalyptic story where you wake up and you're like the last weaver, and your job is to basically figure out what's going on, why we're stuck in a time loop, and how to fix it. And there are people who would, impede your progress and try to keep people and like the population of this area stuck in the time loop. So there's some really interesting narrative elements at play, and the game is just flat out enjoyable to play. It feels good on the controller. I was playing a Steam build, but it is coming to Switch too. And that's the other thing. I got the exclusive on the release date of this. We've been waiting a long time for it, but it's October 8th, and it's coming to Switch 2 and every other major platform. So something to look forward to there, something to mark on your calendar if you have similar taste as I do, where you like a good Metroidvania. If you're a Castlevania fan, obviously we have Castlevania. What is it? Belmont's Curse? Is that I consistently forget the name of this game. Belmont's Curse. That is the other like kind of big, I would say, Metroidvania adjacent game on the horizon. But I was excited to let me see Echo Weaver here. I mean, it's currently on Steam. There's no information about the dates or anything, but yeah, we're coming up on it, October 8th, and go check that out, the trailers. And I mean, I played in the trailer while I was talking about it if you're watching the video version. Extremely exciting game. And I always love seeing what indie developers are doing in these spaces that were defined by AAA titles, as the case of the Metroidvania genre is, because Metroid, a AAA title, Castlevania, a AAA title. But I feel like in the past couple of decades, indie developers have really done the most significant and meaningful work in the space. So Echo Weaver coming October 8th, will be on Switch 2. Very excited for that. But yeah, not much else to talk about in terms of like timely stuff. So what we're going to do is we are going to take our only break of this episode, and we are going to throw to the conversation that I had with Greg Miller from Kinda Funny Games about why The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time is so beloved, so important, so influential, and of course, so great. We will be right back.
Hi there, I'm Hugh from Poderation. If you like today's show, why not check out Dungeons and Dragonfruits, the bizarre, strange, and queer in every sense of the word D&D podcast. Join 5 friends as they laugh, learn, and adventure their way through the weird, wonderful world of Widdershins, where dragons hatch from trees and have adventures of all forms in every shape and size. Available wherever you can get your podcasts.
We are back, and I think it's safe to say that the biggest release in the world of Nintendo for the rest of 2026 is the newly announced remake of The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. While we eagerly look forward to that game, today I actually want to take a look back. I've already done a history of Ocarina of Time episodes, so today I just want to have a casual, unstructured conversation about why Ocarina of Time is so beloved and important in the first place. Joining me for that is a very special guest. You know him as the co-founder of Kinda Funny Games and also already made his debut on the All Things Nintendo podcast by crashing a previous segment. It's Greg Miller. Greg, how's it going?
It's good, Brian. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm so happy you're finally able to join the show. You know, we just had our big episode 250 celebration last week, so you're kicking off the next 250 episodes in pretty exciting fashion.
This is one of those where, you know, I podcast for a living. I'm on camera for a living. Nothing really gets to me. I'm so nervous to be on this show because as a Sega kid, I feel like I don't want to offend anyone. I'm always, whenever I lose on Game Showdown or a Game Trivia show, it's always because of Nintendo questions because I just don't have that background. I'm so terrified of saying the wrong thing.
Well, I think you're going to do great because we're talking about a game that both of us love so dearly. It's a game that was my favorite game of all time for 20 years of my life. And I know it's a game that you also hold very near and dear to your heart. However, before we get to that, we have a time-honored tradition here on the All Things Nintendo podcast whenever somebody makes their debut appearance. Technically, this isn't your debut appearance because you crashed to let us know about the Star Fox Direct that happened 5 minutes after you let us know that. Thank you, Nintendo, for that. However, we get to know our debuting guests through the lens of their history with Nintendo. So it's a 2-part question. The first part is, what was your first Nintendo game? It could be your first Nintendo game you ever played, first one you ever bought, first Nintendo game, like, you know, just a memory you have of going to a family member's house and playing. Where did your history with Nintendo begin?
I mean, my first Nintendo memory would be going over to my friend's Travis's house when I was a little kid, and I would have been in kindergarten age, so probably age 5. And I walked in, and he was playing NES, and he was playing Super Mario Brothers. And I went, "What is this?" And he said, "This is Mario. This is the NES. It's this video game console." I'm like, I have a Sega Master System. Sega Master System is video games. I don't know what this. I was so sure that his was the knockoff. This was the thing that was going to be not popular. I had the winning horse, even though I knew nothing. I almost laughed him out of the room as he tried to explain this man running around stomping on mushrooms. I was like, why don't you come to my house where you can play a real game like Ghost House or Ghostbusters? I was big in my Ghost phase then. And I was wrong. That was Mario Brothers. And that was my first introduction to it. And I was shocked to find out that I had bought the lemon. Everybody else had the perfect one, the great one, the NES. I had a Sega Master System. And rather than admit I was wrong, I committed to that all the way through the Sega Saturn. I would not even give Nintendo my attention, with the exception of, I would say, the Game Boy, which I did get from Aunt Del Nickel Scott for Christmas that first year. As soon as I could get it, my mom infamously said there was no way she was spending $100 on a video game handheld, and I got that. And so I guess Tetris then would be my first real game in Nintendo where I was like, they got something here.
I mean, that's a strong entry point. I always put forth Tetris. I did this last week when we were ranking the top 25 greatest Nintendo games of all time. I think Tetris might be the most perfectly designed video game of all time.
It's hard to argue with. You know what I mean? Every time they put out a new version of Tetris, you're like, okay, but what are you going to do? It's still Tetris, sure. It's great as it is.
Yeah, there's no topping that original formula and that original feeling of Tetris. And it's just like every time you play a new Tetris game, it's like, all right, it's Tetris, but pretty this time. Or it's Tetris with cool music. And it's like, I love Tetris Effect, and Tetris Forever is fantastic from Digital Eclipse, but like that original
Tetris 99 was a great swing. 100%. I was like, oh, this is a cool way to reinvent this.
Yeah, so I mean, those are great entry points from a observer perspective. Seeing Super Mario
Of
Brothers, one of
course,
the most
yeah.
influential games of all time, if not the most influential game of all time, and then getting your hands on Tetris. What an entry point to Nintendo, which brings us to the second part of this question, which is, what is your favorite Nintendo game of all time?
I mean, my favorite Nintendo game of all time is The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. It's
Let's
the reason
go.
when you were like, "What would you want to talk about?" I'm like, I can talk about very specific Nintendo franchises and games, and Ocarina is one of them because like such a definitive moment, I think, in my video game life. You know what I mean? I talk all the time, and I think if you're a Kind of Funny fan and you have heard me wax on and on about video games before, I talk about Metal Gear Solid a lot being this like turning point for me where I really was like, this is what games can be. They're going to be rivaling movies and be able to tell you stories and do other things. And I think my Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time story gets overshadowed by that so many times of how important this game was to me and what this game meant for me and my thoughts on Nintendo, my thoughts on the future of games, what you could do. Like Ocarina of Time is such an amazing thing.
It is. And I always bring it back, and we're going to get into this more, obviously. Like, this is the entire crux of our segment that we're doing. But that sense of wonder that you had when you went out into Hyrule Field for the first time is just absolutely just unrivaled, honestly. And that's the reason why it was eventually overtaken by Breath of the Wild for me, for my favorite game. And that is because I thought that sense of wonder was gone for me forever. I thought I was never going to experience it again. I thought I was desensitized to open world games, open world design, just, scale and scope. I thought I was like, okay, I've played Grand Theft Auto 5. I'm never going to feel what I felt playing Ocarina of Time for the first time again. And then Breath of the Wild just blew me away about like how the joy of exploration and just not knowing what's around every single corner, which is what Ocarina of Time gave me. And eventually that's what led to it leapfrogging. So I have nothing but love for Ocarina of Time. It is, one of, if not the greatest video game to ever exist. And that is why we are celebrating it on this very episode. And if you've never played Ocarina of Time, this episode is going to kind of straddle a weird line for you. I just want to give you a heads up because we are going to be talking some spoilers here, but this is also explaining why you should care about this game. So we're not going to go out of our way to spoil stuff, but we are going to bring up certain plot points, certain mechanics and everything. I want to throw that out there because when I had our previous conversation about Ocarina of Time, somebody in the comments did point out that we spoiled without giving spoiler warning, and I'm like, oh yeah, I guess there are people who haven't played this game, even though like
it's such a tough line to walk right now as all these amazing genre defining games are getting remakes and they're coming out to a brand new audience. And for you and me, they're just like, oh yeah, that was my childhood. That was for Zelda. That was me in high school with my friends. The idea that you don't know X, Y, and Z, who this character actually is. It's like, oh, I get that, but I just never would have thought about it.
So since you were kind of like a Sega loyalist, and I was a big Sega kid as well, what was how did you get first introduced to Ocarina of Time? Did you play a Zelda game before that? Or was it just like, hey, I have a Nintendo 64 now, I'm going to play this?
Yeah, no, I had never played a Zelda before Ocarina, and for whatever reason had just decided they weren't for me. I'm a very weird kid and person, as you know, but as I lived and died by video game magazines, EGM, Game Pro. I was like consuming these things, but I wasn't using them to break outside of my bubble, if that makes sense. Like I was reading about there, looking for the preview of the game I was excited about, and then I always felt like I'd be wasting my money if I didn't read everything. I would read everything, but I feel like it was so rare that I was swayed from a preconceived notion where like reading a preview of Ocarina never made me go, oh, I should play Ocarina. And so, yeah, what happened was, went to high school, made that transition over to the N64 because of my friends, Michael Bryan and Jason Nawara. These were my closest friends in high school who I met when I got to high school. And of course, when I got to high school, I swear I'm going somewhere with this, the WWE Attitude Era had just really kicked off. And I had been a wrestling fan in my grade school days, but fallen out of it like so many of us did. And then this excitement inside of high school that wrestling was back, and it was crazy. You could watch them; they're bleeding, and there's all this, and they were crossing lines they shouldn't cross in modern day, but they were doing it then, and it was fine. And so, me getting into that meant that I really started chasing the old highs of the wrestling video games. And of course, this is when Acclaim was still making the wrestling games, and I would jump on that and I would play Warzone or whatever. But it was then, of course, the AKI games that were so fantastic on N64. And so as I start going over to Mike's house, we're playing, of course, at the time, WCW NWO Revenge. Eventually that becomes WrestleMania 2000, No Mercy. But we're playing that. We're playing Smash Brothers when it comes out. We're playing GoldenEye nonstop. And it was one of those things of playing these games, enjoying them so much that that's when I went back home and it was like, I gotta finally get this N64. You know, I picked the Saturn one Christmas over the N64. Now it's time to go back, hat in hand, ask mom and dad for a Nintendo console. And so I did, and they got it for me. And of course, I mean, the first thing I did, I got that blister pack, I think, from Sam's Club that had the N64, extra controllers, and Super Mario 64, right? And so it was that holiday just sitting there. I have such fond and distinct memories of playing the N64 in my room, on my bed. Outside it's snowing in Chicago, and inside I'm playing the Penguin levels, and I'm throwing them off the side. And it's like, this is such like, I can feel the cold of the window as I tell you that story. And as we went down that, and I'm chasing that high, and I'm enjoying so much of it, you know, it was, I think, that year. So that, what was it, November that Ocarina came out? Or yeah, where that is the year I got my N64. And I remember when I'd go to Mike's house and he'd be wrapping something up in Ocarina, and I'd look at it and I would blow it off. I have no idea. Again, I was still in that mode for some reason of like, whatever. And he would try to tell me how good it was. And then him and Jason would get into an argument of, was it Ganondorf or Ganondorf? They'd have this whole argument on how to pronounce it, and it would go on, and then we'd eventually start wrestling and playing Smash. But over and over, Mike would try to get me to play this game, I wouldn't do it. At one point, the Blockbuster was like, this is months and months later, maybe even a year. Blockbuster's like going out of business, or that location was, and they were selling stuff outside, and they had a gold Ocarina cart that they were selling for like $10, and I still didn't buy it. And I told Mike, he's like, you're gonna regret that. And so it was the Friday before I took the ACT exam, which is, you know, an SAT, it's a college entrance exam kind of thing here in the States. He handed me the cartridge and he handed me the strategy guide, and he said, you gotta at least try this. And I went home and I booted it up and I played that game until 3 a.m. And then I went and took my ACT at 7 a.m. And I did not do that poorly, but I was hooked. I was all in. I couldn't believe what I was playing. And like, you nail it, right? Of like walking in to Hyrule Field, right? You've been in Kokiri Forest. It seems so tight. It's whimsical and magical, and it's this, that, and the other. You're figuring out these little puzzles, and then to walk out there and have it just feel like like it's what it is now when you go and you watch a TV show, right? And it's 4x3, and then suddenly it goes, and it goes letterbox and expands out on the sides. It blew my mind of the go anywhere, do anything. What are you going to find here? And again, it's then the tropes of Zelda that now I know so well of like, that wall looks smashable. How could I do that? I don't know. I'll figure it out. And you know what I mean? Like learning the language of this game, of this world, and then watching that story progress and where it takes you, and the people you meet and the journey you go on, the Temple of Time. I could go on.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those games, along with Super Mario 64, by the way, that not only had to teach you how to play the game, but how to essentially play an entire genre the right way. Because like nobody had really done a sprawling 3D action adventure game like The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time to that point. Like people have tried, but like it wasn't executed in the way that Zelda could. And same thing for Mario 64, right? People had tried to do platformers on a 3D plane, but Mario 64 was everybody's first 3D platformer because it was that good and that effective at tutorializing it. We see that perfectly with the Great Deku Tree in Super Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, where it's like you've always been thinking like, okay, if I blow this up, I can go into this passageway, or I can enter this door if I get a key. And then it's like, all right, how do I get below the spider web here? Yeah, and it's like, God, you can't know it. It's like either you burn it or you have to go all the way up to the top of the tree and then jump and then use that momentum to break through, and then you get down to the extra level. And that also was a light bulb going off on your head of like, oh my God, there's like a whole different language. I could maybe liken it to like Tears of the Kingdom
Yeah.
when you're playing that and you're like, how the heck do I get up there? You're working with a different language at that point, and then you're like, oh wait, I have Ascend. I can go up there like that.
The most magical thing that happens all the time in today and back then, but I think was so rare then, was that idea of, well, if I could do anything, I would do this and it would work. And then you do that and it worked. I like, that's lost now. You're talking about Tears and Breath and so many other open world games that, yeah, no, you can do that. But back in the day, you're playing, I mean, a Genesis game or an SNES game, right? Most of the time, it's all in your imagination what you're trying to do. And then when they did start opening things up, it would be, oh, well, if I shoot that, oh, the lights are, I can't break the lights. You shoot the light, nothing happens, nothing reacts. It wasn't doing it. So for this game to be that, well, I would do it this way. What if I ran around and made him dizzy and you did it and it worked? Like, wow, that's insane. Like, that was the magic, is the magic of Ocarina.
Yeah, and I mean, Nintendo was already so good at that with Super Mario 64, with the fact that like you're talking about like King Bob-omb in Bob-omb Battlefield, the very first level, and you have to run around him to get to the back. Like that was like, oh, okay, yeah, there are other ways to approach boss battles that you just couldn't do on a 2D plane. And I feel like Ocarina of Time was Nintendo really flexing their muscles. And actually, development of Ocarina of Time started alongside Mario 64. So they were kind of learning the language and bouncing off of each other, those two teams were. And one thing that I think that Ocarina of Time really learned from kind of the shortcomings of Mario 64, maybe it was just like they hadn't quite figured it out and they didn't have the time to figure it out, was that they realized that the camera, because I think that now that we're 30 years removed from Mario 64, I think it's safe to say, I know, right? I still remember
my gray hair. It all makes sense.
I think it's safe to say that the camera, I think, is the biggest
for sure
headache for Mario 64. And I was reading something on this actually while I was prepping for this episode, that Nintendo learned that with Mario 64, they were focusing the camera on Mario because he was the star of that. But with Ocarina of Time, they pulled it back and focused it on the world. And that made the camera that much more tenable. And, you know, I think that has kind of become the main way that a lot of developers pursue putting cameras in 3D games now. It's not you are the star, which you still are the star, but like you need to see the world completely in order to be able to fully navigate it.
I mean, Z targeting, right, in Ocarina, like that was such a game changer. I remember how good and crazy that felt of lock on and then sidestep and go all around. It's like, oh wow, like I had to learn how to play that way, and then it felt so natural.
Yeah, so like there were a couple of games that did lock on combat, you know. It was like Mega Man Legends, I think, did it, and then there was a game called Cyber Troopers Virtual On that had lock on targeting.
Everyone remembers it really well. They loved it,
but it just you know, Zelda Ocarina of Time was the one that perfected it and then popularized it, and then every 3D action combat focused game since, including and beyond Elden Ring, have continued to carry on the tenets perfected by Ocarina of Time. And it's like the influence of Ocarina of Time is just impossible to overstate.
Yeah, 100%.
Hi there, I'm Hugh from Poderation. If you like today's show, why not check out Dungeons and Dragonfruits, the bizarre, strange, and queer in every sense of the word D&D podcast. Join 5 friends as they laugh, learn, and adventure their way through the weird, wonderful world of Widdershins, where dragons hatch from trees and have adventures of all forms in every shape and size. Available wherever you can get your podcasts.
And then there's also, last week we had IGN's Logan Plant on the show, and he was talking about when he was reading Pierre Schneider's review of Ocarina of Time, his original review from back when it came out on N64. He was just mind blown by the fact that there was a context sensitive A button, which at the time was a huge deal. And today it's just like, oh yeah, that's what every video game ever does. When you get near an item, there's a button that is like, hey, do the thing, like whether it's open a door, pick up an item, or like look at a map or something. And it's like the number of things that this established, number of conventions that we just take for granted in 2026 that Ocarina of Time established back in 1998 is absurd.
I mean, it's a masterpiece. You know, there's no amount of praise you can heap on it and be like, maybe I'm putting it up too high. Like, it's incredible and it holds up, which is why it's still awesome to go back and play it, let alone worry about this remake.
Mm-hmm. And you also you brought up Ganondorf, which, we take Ganondorf for granted. Like, oh yeah, he's just a bad guy that's always been. And it's like, no, this is where Ganondorf made his debut, one of the most iconic villains in video game history. And what I love about this is like people always talk about like the way that like games like BioShock play with player agency and like how that it's something only a video game can do, is like have you do something and then realize, oh wait, you were the fool. They tricked you into doing something here. And like, the would you kindly aspect of BioShock.
Yeah.
This also does something like that, where like when you're young Link and you're going around, you're just like, oh yeah, I have to collect all these stones, and like then that'll let me open and grab the Master Sword. You're thinking you're doing the right thing, and then Ganondorf pops in and be like, haha, you fell for my trap, and now I can seal you in this time, and I can go take over Hyrule. And it's like, wait a second, what? I didn't mean to do that.
Right, yeah. What seems so simple on the surface then gets so much deep.
Yeah. Do you remember the first time that you pulled out the Master Sword, got that cutscene, and then you emerged and it's just a completely different world outside?
Brian, not only do I remember, this sounds like we rehearsed it. Not only do I remember it, it's like one of my definitive high school memories and maybe foibles. But I was in high school, as I've already said multiple times. And at some point in honors English, we had to do our essay. They were like prepping you, we're gonna do the exam today. The exam is gonna be basically you writing a college essay, and you have to do it during this class period. They pass out the topic, and it's compare and contrast two time periods that are covered in the same book. And they listed the books you could use. I had read none of these books. And you bet your bottom dollar, I went, all right, let's gamble it. And I was like, there's a video game called The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time, that takes place in two distinct time periods. And like right behind, it's like Hyrule Field is obviously number one, entering that for the first time. But like 1.25 is walking out of the Temple of Time. Like, I remember it happens and I'm like, whoa, this is cool. And you open up those doors, and this city that I felt like I knew so well and that was so vibrant and filled with, again, like for the games we're playing in the time period, right, of like being able to run up and talk to the couple that's dancing and you interact, they get mad if you smash the pot. Like, there's so much stuff in interactivity that makes you feel like you know the people and know the vibe, to come out and they're all like mummies and monsters and you're like, what the hell happened here? Like, I mean, I am not even joking, rocked me of like, I can't believe that they did this and that I'm feeling, right? Again, back to the comparison I always make where I talk about Metal Gear on such a high pedestal. The fact that I was able to feel that and be rocked and be like, I can't believe this happened. I'm right there as Link, right? I'm not watching that. I am in that moment, and that's so powerful.
Yeah, and there's something to be said about the juxtaposition between, your young Link walking through Castletown. There's the happy music playing, everybody's dancing. You can hear it in your head right now, 100%. And it's just so bright and sunny and joyful. And you can go and like, there's the guys that are like laughing and joking around, and there's the couple dancing, like you mentioned. There's a dog running around. Then you go and pull the sword out. This is supposed to be like your main objective, and then you come out like, oh God, what have I done?
Yeah.
And there, like you said, there's redeads all over. There's no real like upbeat music. It's just kind of like this gloomy like buzz underneath of it. Yep. And then the first time you encounter a redead and they freeze you in place and then slowly walks towards you, and then if you're too close, jumps on you and starts biting you, you're like, oh my God, what happened? And then you eventually unravel that like, oh yeah, we're like 7 years in the future now, and Ganondorf's taking over Hyrule, and just like the havoc that he's wrought. And then not only that, but then journeying all around to the different areas of Hyrule and being like, oh yeah, Zora Domain. I remember it had that nice chill music. And then you get there and it's like, oh my God, it's frozen. Yep. And then like, the eruptions at Death Mountain and everything that happens as you go to these different areas. It really does feel like 7 years have passed and the worst possible outcome could have happened, did happen, where Ganondorf is now just decimating these different races across Hyrule. And it really was affecting to me too. I just don't know how to put that into like perspective of people who didn't experience that back in the day, but like that was something that video games didn't really do back then.
It's not only they didn't do it, I think they had never done it like this.
Mhm.
I feel like I've reviewed several games recently that are playing around with different time periods, and I keep faulting them in the reviews for not doing enough with it. Like, it isn't time. I'm able to jump back and forth between time, but I'm not affecting them all. And so many people bring up Chrono Trigger of like, oh, well, it's like, and it's like, that's a great example. But I honestly feel, especially with the brand new at the time perspective of this, right? Again, like we all talk about how Mario, your first 3D game, oh my God, I can swivel the camera. Like, going from a 2D flat or top down, whatever you want to call which game you're referencing, to then being in this world and being inside of Hyrule and being on the ground floor of that and seeing all of this happen, like, it all felt so different. And yes, to run back to these places that you knew also lively and colorful and filled with whimsy and wonder, and see them destroyed, depressed, like you can feel the weight of everything that's happened on top of them. That was so powerful and so well done. And then it would be that light bulb moment, right, where it happens in Hyrule. You go to the next place, you find out it's bad. Like, oh, what about the others? Well, I have to go check everything that I've checked on before. What is going on?
Yeah, and I think that it's best exemplified through the dungeons, because the dungeons when you're a kid are like a little bit like, yeah, they're dangerous, but they're not like, this is like going to end, this is going to make this race of people extinct if you don't do something about it.
Yeah.
Whereas like, Jabu Jabu's belly, like, that there's something about that where it's like, all right, we got to help the princess get in there. And then like when you're older, it's like, yeah, the entire Zora's domain and its existence is at risk if you don't fix this. Do you have a favorite dungeon in this game?
I mean, so this is another one, right, where when I got the blue tunic, right, when we're in the Zora's domain and now I can swim and I can conquer that dungeon, I can conquer that area, like, that not only sets me off as like, all right, cool, I feel like this is with me forever, it then affects me for Smash Brothers the rest of my life, where I'm not a good Smash Brothers player, but I'm decent to middle of the pack. Like, I can win sometimes as Link, but I am always blue tunic Link. When people would ask me before, who are you? I'm blue tunic Link. Now I'm blue tunic Toon Link. It's just with the amount of things we've added and changed, but 64, I wasn't touching it unless I was blue tunic Link. Like, that is where I'm going to go, because it's just so locked in. And I loved those people. And shout out to the Gorons. I always love them too. But like, for everything, for an entire package, I would go there.
But so you're saying the water dungeon is your favorite?
Yeah.
Wow, that's usually the one people like just throw all the shade at. Where you're talking.
I also like Starfield. I don't like popular things.
I think people have come around on Starfield at this point, but like,
we're getting there. Slowly but surely, we're getting there.
There's a very funny moment in our Breath of the Wild rapid fire interview that we did with Shigeru Miyamoto and Eiji Aonuma, where
name drops.
Where Ben Reeves, our former Game Informer editor, said, is the water temple going to suck in this game? And Miyamoto looks at Eiji Aonuma and goes, no, because he's not designing it. And I was like, wow.
You love the shade. Yeah, again, I don't know. It's for me so much the overall journey of it. And it was, I think, because the Zoras meant so much to me, and because I loved the tunic and then that ability to get underwater, that's what I think about, not the design, not the thing. And it's also, I think, interesting for the conversation, compelling for the conversation of like, to this day, I am not I go back and replay games guy. I just feel like there's always so much to do, I'm always chasing something else. So when I beat Ocarina in high school, I mean, that was back in the day where I guess, you only have so much money. You play things over and over again. I must have done a couple more runs of it or whatever, but then it was on to Majora's Mask. Then it was on to the next thing, blah, blah, blah. And so like, just recently I restarted it, I started a playthrough, I should say, with my son. He's 4.5. He loves video games. I was showing him something on YouTube, and down in the corner, he's like, what's that? And it was the orchestra doing the Zelda concert. And I started up and he played it, and we sat there while he ate some dinner. I don't always do this, but I let him have some screen time while he ate his food. And then I was like, all right, time to get in the tub. And he's like, well, what is Zelda? And I was like, let's go. And so I told him the story of Ocarina while he was in the bath and ran through it. And I'm like, this is a game we can play. And he's like, I want to do that this weekend. And so I went and bought the N64 controller for Switch and, set it all up and started off on that. And it's like, it was such a dose of nostalgia, member berries, everything else. But then this crazy flip of it, of watching him. I'm like, how do you think we break that spider web? The one you just talked about, right? And we're trying to do the fire. We jump off it's like watching him experience it and learn it, and watching him take in Hyrule Field. And he didn't have the same kind of impact because, of course, he plays Forza Horizon. He knows an open world. He knows how vast the vista can be. But he had so many questions. And like when, the Deku tree dies, spoilers, he was like, is he really dead? Like, what about this? I'm like, yes, but look, this seed has fallen and there's a sapling. And so it's like, it's a long way to say, I don't remember the water temple turn for turn, but it's the moment of the blue tunic. It's the moment of helping the Zora. Like, that's what I'm thinking of.
Mm-hmm. So one of the most controversial parts about the water temple is that you have to like go into the menu and take off the boots and then put them back on. And then it's just a menu navigation nightmare at times.
Yeah. But didn't it make you feel like you earned it? Like, that was the thing.
Eventually,
I earned it doing that. I was like, I am Link. I'm doing this.
I definitely prefer the more elegant solution of the Ocarina of Time 3D, where it was just like an item that you could push with a button and take them on and off.
That you didn't earn it. They didn't earn it. Look at you. You gained nothing. You robbed yourself of the experience, whatever the meme is.
Well, I have a feeling that will be massaged a little bit for the remake. But we're going to get to the remake in a second here. How do you feel overall about the items that you get in Ocarina of Time? Do you have a favorite?
You mean between like my weapons, or what do you mean?
Like hook shot, boomerang.
Oh, yeah, okay. For me, I was always a boomerang guy. Well, really? I always like my bow and arrow. So like, you give me anything right now, when we started up Diablo 4 years ago now or whatever, right? Like I want to be a ranged class. I want to be a ranger. I want to fall back. I want to have arrows. I want to have that kind of space between me. So that's always been the way I would go. Hookshot, of course, was, again, for me jumping in, not even knowing what I'm getting into, right? Like you're talking about discovering these items. And again, like what this game does so well of presenting you a dungeon where you're like, well, I don't know how to do any of this stuff. And then you get the thing that can get you up there, close the eye, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I think that all runs together.
Mm-hmm. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about the boss fights because they all use the items so effectively where it's like, man, like, you get the hook shot and it's like, all right, you need to use the hook shot on this guy. Or like, the very first thing you get like the slingshot, you have to use that on the enemies. And it's like, they do such a great job of like introducing a gameplay element. And it's like, okay, you definitely have to use that in the next big encounter you're going to have. And they always have carried that forward in subsequent Zelda games. I mean, up until Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, obviously, they gave you a lot more freedom. But the thing that I was that has stuck with me over the years is the Ganondorf and Ganon final battle.
You can't steal my answer. You haven't even asked the question yet. You're gonna jump to my. Go ahead.
I just want to talk about this final battle because, like, I know a lot of people are underwhelmed by the final dungeon because it's just kind of like, here are samplings of the other temples you've gone to, and then it leads to a final battle against Ganondorf, which I can understand that criticism. Maybe they'll fix that in the remake, but I tend to think it's still fine even the way it is. But like, the fact that I still use for shorthand whenever there's a mechanic in a video game where like a guy throws a thing at you and you need to hit it back and then he hits it back and it just becomes this game of tennis. I still use this Ganondorf battle as the shorthand for that. Like, what about this final battle is so special to you?
For me, it's that locked in memory, place, and time where I remember, every time I would come back to school, because I'm playing during the week, right? I'm telling Mike about what I'm doing, where I'm at, yada, yada, yada. And I remember banging my head into the wall on this fight, specifically at the part you're talking about, of Ganon's firing this light at me. And I couldn't, for the life of me, figure out what they wanted me to do. I'm trying to, like, the mirror shield? Like, what am I doing here? How do I do any of this stuff? And I want to give myself credit that I probably banged my head into it for 30 to 45 minutes. Maybe it was longer. I don't know anymore. But it was at the end of a session. I had to go to bed. And I remember getting to school and telling Mike about it. And he's like, if you don't mind me helping you, like, you got to swing your sword and hit it back. And it was another one of those, like, what the really? Like, that's dumb. Like, me going like, I can't believe the game allows me to do that. Again, we're back to like, that makes perfect sense for the game you're playing, but I wrote that off of like the game in your head, you don't think about it. Like, I can't do that. I can't knock this thing back at him, right? Like, even this game this many hours in is still encouraging me and forcing me to experiment and have these aha moments in a way that I was just not prepared to have.
Yeah, and I think there was this other moment where I was like completely subverted my expectations, where like, you know, Ganondorf goes down, spoiler alert again, and then it's like the castle is collapsing and like you have to go out, and then like you think like, okay, I did it, I beat the game, and
Sure.
then Ganondorf turns into Beast Ganon, and it's like it suddenly all came crashing back to me of like, oh my God, like this is the actual final boss. Because I mean, my Zelda journey started with the original Zelda on NES, going over to my cousin's house and being
Nice.
like, oh, you guys have a Nintendo, let me see what you have. My aunt and uncle only had Mario, Duck Hunt, and Tetris. You guys have this game called Zelda, and the cartridge is like shiny gold, let me try that.
Cool.
And then going through and like learning who Ganon was. And then it's like, okay, then Link to the Past, I rented that when it came out on SNES, and learning who Ganon was through that. And it's like, man, now this is like Ganondorf, is that like related to Ganon? I'm assuming it is. And then it's like, oh, it is Ganon. And it's like, now the guy is here, the beast is here. And like, he's a bit of a pushover compared to Ganondorf, I would say. But like, you can't deny the kind of climactic epic feel.
Scale of it, right?
Yes.
Like that was the thing, the scope, the escalation of putting little Link, who is like big Link now, right? There's little Link, there's big Link, but then put it just something that immediately makes you go, I'm smaller than I've ever been.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, just like the immediate familiarity and the callback to like the guy you've been fighting over multiple games is not only back, but he is looking more menacing than ever. And like,
right.
you remember like, you know, I remember like the lightning striking behind him as he emerges out of his like Ganondorf form. And it's like, oh my God, this is like maybe the most epic thing that I guess I was 11 or 12 years old. My 11 or 12-year-old brain had ever registered in its entire existence to that point.
100%. Like you're locked in that moment. And again, the game is doing stuff we've seen before. You've seen different boss phases, of course, but again, in this 3D world that's so realized and able to take you on such a journey and such an adventure, to still have that aha, that spark that you don't know what's going to happen at the end of the game. So impressive.
So we're going to wrap up talking about the original Ocarina of Time here in a second, but I don't want to do that until we talk about the music, because not only is it a central gameplay mechanic, but I think it has one of the greatest soundtracks in all of gaming history. Do you agree with me on that point?
Yes, I don't use the Nintendo Music app for anything other than I need Animal Crossing tunes right now, and I want to listen to Ocarina of Time.
Do you have a favorite song?
I mean, you're talking, I feel like, about compositions and stuff. Yeah, but it's like just the do 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 do. That is like when I go to a happy place, that's what's playing. A little ocarina, do 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 do. Like it's like, again, what Hyrule was when you're young Link, and how nice that is, and like, you know, what a fitting metaphor for being a child and then being an adult. Just like the horrors you'll need to face. But when you're here and I'm looking at my 4.5-year-old son, yeah, that's what song is playing when he's playing soccer and in the pool and even at school, he's having a great time.
I was going to go with, I always say Soraya. That's how I said it growing up. I guess it's Saria.
Yeah.
Which whatever.
Don't even get me started. The amount of things I pronounce and I'm broken and I'll never be able to fix it. Ganondorf.
I would go with that. I would go with Song of Storms,
sure,
which is just one of those songs that once it's in your head, and I apologize to the listening audience, once it's in your head, it's not exiting your head, because that it's so catchy. It just plays on a loop. It's one of the better compositions, I think, musically speaking. I actually saw a reel that came up on my algorithm on Instagram this week, where John Baptiste, the incredible musician, was like, somebody was like, hey, do you know Song of Storms? And he's like, yeah, I know Song of Storms. And he just played the most incredible like jazz composition of that. And it's just like, man, I wish I had that type of musical talent. Like that would just be incredible. But yeah, he's like a generational guy. But it is one of those songs that people who know musical theory respect, because it's so well written. I think that's the case for a lot of Zelda music, but in particular, Ocarina of Time, just banger after banger on that soundtrack. And you're right, 100%. It's the one that I go to Nintendo Music for. But yeah, so we're not just talking about this game because we like it. This is one of the most influential games of all time, one of the greatest games of all time. We talked about it last week on episode 250 when we were ranking the 25 greatest Nintendo games of all time. It won number one. It's also the highest rated Metacritic game of all time. It has an average of 99 out of 100. It's like, that's untouchable. I feel like that's
rare
an untouchable
air
record.
we'll never see again.
Yeah, I don't think any game will ever achieve that. So pivoting to the remake that
Sure.
we learned last month, we are getting
anxiously anticipating.
Yeah, exactly.
Should have some details on it, shouldn't we? Nintendo year's getting pretty close here.
How do you why are you so excited about this upcoming remake? I always think of like remakes because a lot of people get down on remakes, right? They're like, oh, well, make something new. I almost think of it, and this is a flawed comparison, but I always think of it more of like a cover song, right? Like I think of like Pearl Jam. They did Love Reign O'er Me by The Who, and it didn't bring anything new. But man, that song was so good when they recorded it. And that was an incredible cover by another talented group of people. This might not be a one-to-one comparison the way that like maybe Star Fox was when it came out earlier this year, where it was like, okay, this is a completely different group of developers. This is going to involve, Eiji Aonuma, obviously. It's probably going to have Miyamoto's involvement in some capacity. But like some of the people who were involved with the original are going to be involved.
Hi there, I'm Hugh from Poderation. If you like today's show, why not check out Dungeons and Dragonfruits, the bizarre, strange, and queer in every sense of the word D&D podcast. Join 5 friends as they laugh, learn, and adventure their way through the weird, wonderful world of Widdershins, where dragons hatch from trees and have adventures of all forms in every shape and size. Available wherever you can get your podcasts.
Involved with this inevitably, but it's still going to be a new generation of developers are probably going to be leading the charge here. So I guess all that to say, what about this remake makes you so excited?
Man, great question. And I think it's hard to answer sometimes without being insulting to people who love current Zelda. Breath of the Wild and Tears are amazing, also masterpiece games. They're not what I think of for Zelda. Like, I finished Breath of the Wild and had a great time and loved it. Tears, I put 45 some hours into it. I wasn't on the review. You know the job, Brian. So it's like, well, I'm on to 3 other reviews, and before you know it, you look back and maybe my time passed. And then it's like, oh, it's going to get a Switch 2 version. I'll wait for that. That comes out. I'm into, a million other reviews and games and blah, blah, blah. So I've never rolled credits on Tears, right? But part of that is it's not as simple as, oh, I don't like weapons breaking. I don't love that aspect of it, but it's more Ocarina is my first Zelda. Ocarina set the bar for what a Zelda is, and in some ways, for me, foolishly tricked me into thinking that's what Zelda was. Because you figure I get Ocarina, and then I get Majora's Mask, and I'm like, cool, I can't wait for the 3rd game in this series. And it's like, well, no, now we're going Wind Waker, which I also adored, don't get me wrong. But it was, when I close my eyes and you say, think of Zelda, you think of Link, I'm thinking of this timeline, this version of the game. And so there's an excitement for me to return home. And there's an excitement for me to return home and have it look the way I remember it looking. Playing the Switch 2 or whatever, the Switch Online version of Ocarina right now with my son and the N64 controller is great. And it was great for a Saturday. He's still not the biggest narrative yet in games, right? He loves turning on Spider-Man 2 and doing random crimes. He loves driving around in Forza. He loves that kind of vibe, right? He's playing through Star Fox, but that's spaceships in a different conversation. This one was, I think, a little bit more like he needed me to help him read the things and yada, yada. So it's like, whatever, but you go back and even now it holds up. I would love to try to squeeze in another of my own playthrough of the original before we get there. But it is dated. It does look flat. It is hilarious to walk into Hyrule Field now and just flat, like a couple polygons. And they're like, man, this is a different time. So what excites me about the remake is going home and then hopefully, knock on wood, seeing it through my high school eyes again, seeing it what it would look like or what I remember it looking like this way, and going back on that journey that, yeah, I've been on, but like I said earlier in the show, like I am not I play it every year. I replay it every year. Like I haven't been there in a long time. I haven't been in I haven't been 3/4 in that game in 30 years or whatever it has been. You know what I mean? Like I'm stoked to go back through that and have those moments of I remember this so well, and then the other moments of I have no idea. Did I ever do this? Is this new? Is this old? Like that is just exciting to me. And I also think, for the people who are poo-pooing it or not all about it, I get, not every game's for every person, but I like this because I don't think this gets in the way of the next mainline Zelda. This isn't like the main event. This is all hands on deck. Like, that's happening. I like that these remakes, like, an Oblivion, can pop up and be like, yo, you're not getting Elder Scrolls 6 for a very long time. Hey, Fallout fan Greg Miller, you're not getting 5 for a very long time. So yeah, here's 3, here's New Vegas. Let's give you stuff to go back, remember, enjoy. And more importantly, I think, to the people you were talking about at the top of the show who are worried about spoilers in this episode and when they hear about it, go back and play a game that you might have missed and you didn't have the hardware. And even if you have the Switch now, it looks dated and you don't like it. Old game is old. I get that. Like, let's let you enjoy a piece of gaming history through a new lens.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, to your point, I definitely had that feeling when I was playing through Star Fox. Star Fox 64 is a top 5 N64 game for me. And going back to it through this remake that came out earlier this year, I remember thinking like, oh my God, I wish I could show this to Brian from the 90s and be like, this is a game you will eventually play. And it's like, obviously the game you're playing right now, but look how beautiful it is. And look how like amazing the cutscenes are now. And look how much more story you get now. And that's what I'm most excited for Ocarina of Time on Switch 2. And I also think that, like, to your point about coming home and going back to like that format, because I think there is a lot of sentiment towards the Wild era of Zelda games where it's like, oh man, this doesn't feel like the Zelda that I know. And I totally understand that, even though, it's, 2 of my favorite games of all time in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. But I understand that criticism as somebody who has grown up with this franchise. And my point has always been, I think that's why they're doing this remake, because they want to get back to that more structured, more linear, but still open design of a 3D Zelda game that we got with Twilight Princess and Ocarina and Wind Waker, where it's like, yeah, you're supposed to go to this dungeon first, then this one, then this one. And the way that they can do that without making it feel like they're like taking a step back for the people who got introduced through Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom is by remaking one of the most, if not the most beloved video game of all time. People will say, oh, I got into it through Breath of the Wild. This is a remake of a classic game, so I'm just going to play that. And then they will understand the appeal of that more structured design. And it won't feel, then when like the next game comes out and it's a more structured design, those people who got introduced through Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom will have played that remake, hopefully. And then they won't feel like it was like such a step back from like the big open explorable world of Hyrule in the Wild era games.
100%. I think, it makes sense for those reasons. And I think those reasons go into, this is often used so negatively, but the business of Nintendo, right? And the business of video games, where yes, when you have something as big as Breath of the Wild, when you have something as big as Tears of the Kingdom, as big as the Switch and Switch 2, like, it behooves you to bring out the greatest hits and get people to go play those. And obviously, comparing Zeldas, you're going to see a lesser return on something that isn't those big games. But every time someone picks up Tears and falls in love with it, there's a chance they could be somebody who's going to go, oh, what is Link's Awakening? Oh, what is Echoes of Wisdom? What is Ocarina of Time? They're going to look and go, oh, I've heard about Ocarina of Time for years and years at this point. Look at, it's here. It's brand new, in quotes. It's $50, whatever it's going to be, $60. Let's go see and what this is all about and jump back into it.
So looking at the remake in particular, on the spectrum of like, let's say Ocarina of Time 3D, where it's like, this is like basically the exact same game, just prettier and with quality of life improvements, to like Final Fantasy VII Remake, where we're keeping essentially the same narrative, but it's an entirely different game. How transformational should this remake be to the original in your eyes?
Man, what a tough question. This is one of the reasons I was so angry at SGF with them not actually showing anything, because I want to know so bad what it's going to be under the hood. Is it going to be one for one prettier, here we go, or is it going to be we're experimenting and changing and whatever? I fall into the category that I don't want them to go Final Fantasy VII Remake way. I don't want it to be radically different. I don't want it to be, and I mean, we're talking about a game or trilogy that fundamentally changed everything, right? Where you're playing the game like, that shouldn't happen. What the hell? Why would they get to this ending? Like, what's going on? Like, I'm okay, obviously, with them taking liberties and changing things. And I think more than anything, fleshing it out. Like, it's not going to have the same blow your mind feel, not even look, feel, if what is just the same characters where they were before, bam, there they are, and they have the same limited amount of dialogue. Because in 2026, that doesn't feel groundbreaking. That doesn't seem, that'll be quaint, if not annoying, based on whatever price tag they put on it, right? So it's like they have such a fine line to walk between, hey, here's what we're doing, and here's how we're giving quests, and here's how we're doing side quests. Like, I don't envy them stepping into this arena and how they're going to change it, but I think what's there is definitely not broken. So we don't need to fix it. We just need to renovate it, and we just need to make it modern. And I know those are very ambiguous terms, but I don't want to see them go so far away from what Ocarina is that they then already have everybody pissed off.
Mm-hmm.
What about you?
I really do think that I would like it to be closer to the remain loyal side of
Mhm.
of that spectrum than like, let's just rebuild everything and tell loosely the same story. I think that they need to do a little bit more than like Star Fox did on Switch 2.
I agree with that, yeah.
Where it's like, okay, the same thing, just prettier graphics, better controls, and some cutscenes in between the missions that tell a little bit more of the story. I think that they need to do just a little bit more than that. Maybe make Hyrule Field a bit more expansive, a bit more explorable. Maybe add some additional like side stuff or something. But it is a really tightrope walk that they are doing with this.
Yeah.
Like, how do you improve upon the most critically acclaimed video game to ever release? Like, that's the ultimate task. But like, if there's any company that I have faith in doing it, it's Nintendo. Like,
For sure.
Like I talked about, so many of the people who worked on the original Ocarina of Time are still there. I mean, Eiji Aonuma, that was his coming out party as like a Zelda, like the Zelda figurehead, was Ocarina of Time and then into Majora's Mask. And it's just going to be a tricky thing to try and nail down, because no matter what they do, people are going to be upset. And no matter what they do, though, on the other side of that coin, people are going to be excited because it's Ocarina of Time. And it's like, some people will say, what do you mean I have new content to explore? This is messing with the greatest game of all time. And then other people will be like, I have new content to explore.
New content, let's go.
Yeah. What is the thing? Like, we'll end on this. What is the thing for you where, say they announce tomorrow, there is an Ocarina of Time direct. We're gonna do 20 minutes exploring all the new stuff of Ocarina of Time, the remake that's coming out later this year. What is the one thing that would pop up that would make you just explode with excitement if they were like, this is a thing we are doing in this remake?
For me, it would be, stick with me. I want to be very clear with what I'm saying. New side quests, new side content, right? Like, I think the core story of Ocarina is so well done that I don't need to tweak with that or whatever. But I want more people in Hyrule to help out. And I want more ramifications of, here are the quests I'm doing as young Link, and that's really cool. And then when I'm an adult Link and everything, I see the whatever thing I had to go get for the man and his wife, and it's all destroyed and dilapidated. You know what I mean? Like, I want to feel my fingerprints from the past and the future. Like, I want that. What the reason it stands out so much is Lon Lon Ranch, and it is meeting these people, and it is having these conversations. And so I want not even more of more of those, and I want them to matter more. That's what I really want, is matter. I know I'm not going to get choice. I'm always I want choice in video games, but I'm talking about my RPGs. In my Zelda, I don't need that. I just need things to matter. I just need people and personalities and stories, I guess. You know what I mean? I think this is such a great story that in the N64 era could just strictly be show, don't tell. And this one, I need you to tell me a bit so that then it can show even more.
And I think that that's a great hope for this, is that we're going to get more context surrounding everything that we see. And that leads into one of the things that I would like to see, which is something that they could learn actually from Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. When you complete those areas, like if you go to Zora's Domain, you complete that divine beast, whatever terrible state that Zora's Domain was in is suddenly alleviated, right? Like so that's the thing that always kind of bothered me with Ocarina of Time, was you would go to Zora's Domain, you'd complete the water temple, and the thing was still frozen. And you're like, well, did I save them or was it too late? Like, did I just make it so it
Yeah.
didn't get worse? So I would like to see some of that where it's like, yeah, the world is still in peril, but I'm making incremental improvements around where I can, and then give more context to like how the people are feeling after you solve this problem. Like there's a lot that I could say about like Hyrule Field, expanding that, making it feel endless the way it
Of
once did.
course.
But also, like, if you look at Hyrule Field and Breath of the Wild, the thing that is actually named Hyrule Field is not necessarily that huge, but like it's still bigger than what we have in the original Ocarina of Time. I think that looking at like something like Halo Campaign Evolved, which just came out last week, you know, we are like those guys were like, yeah, we're staying very loyal to the source material. We're for our artistic design, we're looking at stuff that like the original intent that Bungie had, but also like, you know, we're adjusting some things here and there. Like we're making this combat arena a little bit bigger so you have more space to operate in. So there are ways that you can do that in subtle manner. I just don't think that you'd be able to subtly improve Hyrule Field because like 1998 versus 2026 in terms of like size and scope is a completely different ball game. So I think that they do need to do some work there, or else I think first time players are going to exit out into Hyrule Field and they're going to be like, this is what wowed you guys back, you know, almost 30 years ago.
Yep, that's going to be a problem.
So I mean, again, if it wasn't Nintendo remaking one of their own games, I don't know how much faith I would have in it. I mean, who knows? Maybe it isn't like Nintendo proper because they never release who the developer is for these games until like the week of release.
Exactly. You'll have to get the review copy and go to the credits to actually figure it out.
Yeah. So hopefully it is Nintendo. I mean, either way, you have to assume Aonuma is involved heavily. It is funny, though. I bring this up a few times. In 2023, when I interviewed Aonuma and Hidemaru Fujibayashi, I ended by saying like, you know, I was just in Japan with Square Enix for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and they told me that the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy was inspired by the Final Fantasy 13 press trip in North America when a bunch of journalists were asking Kitase, hey, are you going to do a Final Fantasy VII remake? And he went back and talked to Nomura, and Nomura was like, yeah, I would love to. Let's do it. So I told that story to Aonuma, and I was like, with that said, I want to ask you, when are you doing an Ocarina of Time remake? And he laughed and said, no comment. And then, and so I definitely have been hoping for this for a very long time, and Aonuma is well aware of that. So hopefully,
so you made this happen.
Well, hey, he has told me that after my interview with him in 2019, I asked him about a Skyward Sword remaster without motion controls, and he was like, so like you use buttons and sticks for the whole thing? And he's like, that sounds close to impossible. That was his answer. And then I asked him about that in 2023. I was like, hey, you told me back in 2019 that was close to impossible. Then we got this 2 years later. What happened? He's like, yeah, well, you know, after the interview, I during the interview, I probably did think it was close to impossible. Then I went home and thought about it more, and I came up with a solution. And I was like, oh, okay, so I'll take credit for that.
Yeah, there you go. Another one for you.
Yeah, there we go. So, Greg, I think it's safe to say this is one of our, if not most anticipated games for the rest of 2026. Agreed. So, you know, thank you so much for joining me to talk about why we are so in love with Ocarina of Time and why we are so looking forward to this remake that Nintendo announced at the tail end of its latest Nintendo Direct. And thank you so much for joining me for this episode of All Things Nintendo.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
And thank you so much to everyone for listening. As you know, my Patreon and the associated Discord server are the best ways to get any questions or comments in, but you can also get in touch with me at brian@allthingsnintendo.com or hit me up on Blue Sky or Instagram at Brian P. Shea. Greg, tell everyone where they can find you.
You can find me at kindafunny.com, where we're live each and every weekday with the number 1 and number 2 daily video game podcast in the world, Kinda Funny Games Daily and Kinda Funny Games Cast.
No introduction needed there. I mean, obviously, you guys have absolutely killed it over there. So thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule here. That is our show for this week. Thank you again for listening. Take care. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of All Things Nintendo. Before we close out this recording, I would be remiss if I did not take some time to thank the $10 patrons of this podcast. Alex Stadnick, Andy Junkins, Ben Richland, Big Mitch, Chad Brecky, Chaps My Ass, Damian Patino, Derek Sigmund, Dusty Beeman, Ian T. Clark, Jawar Hello, Johnny Five, Jose Villalobos, Joshua DeProy, KC Radioman, Kenny Shaw, Cody Gibson, Creeper 207, MPI Creates, Nathaniel Edison, Ozman83, Paul at Drunk on Mako, Pratable, Rob McCann, Bobby Mac 265, Robert Sosa, Roberto Nieves, Russell Sayer, Smithy Poo, The Gamerheads Podcast, Zane Sink, and Zek 3 Sword Sama. Truly, every time I say that I could not do this podcast without the folks I just named, and as well as the other people who support this show on Patreon, I am not exaggerating in the least. This means so much to me. Every single person who listens to this show, especially those who stick with it week after week, means the world. But the people who support it on Patreon are the folks who keep this show alive. So thank you so much for enabling me to continue going every single week.
What happens when Toys R Us kids grow up and become parents? We become co-hosts of the show where Geeky Fathers unite to share the joys, challenges, and hilarity of navigating parenthood. Because bringing a grown-up doesn't mean you stop being a fan. It just means your sidekicks call you Dad. And Potteration means I'm proud of you, son. Find Wise and Nerdy everywhere that you consume your media and podcasts. We are a proud member of Potteration.
Hi there, I'm Hugh from Podderation. If you like today's show, why not check out Dungeons and Dragonfruits, the bizarre, strange, and queer in every sense of the word D&D podcast. Join 5 friends as they laugh, learn, and adventure their way through the weird, wonderful world of Widdershins, where dragons hatch from trees and have adventures of all forms in every shape and size. Available wherever you can get your podcasts.